you're on the Facebook page there. Good morning everyone, my name's Nick Houston and I'm the Director of VisAustralia, also migration agent and lawyer, and I'm very pleased to be able to present this seminar to you. It's about the changes to the Australian migration program that are taking effect on the 16th of November, so that is in 2 days' time. And specifically we'll be looking at the new policy, which is to encourage new migrants to move to areas of regional Australia. There's a couple of new visas that the government is creating that will facilitate people's ability to migrate to Australia. It'll be slightly easier to migrate with the regional visa in terms of the points test and various other factors, and it's important that people understand what this new process may mean for their overall migration journey. So, yeah, in terms of housekeeping, we'll try and keep the seminar to 30 minutes, half an hour. There's a lot of information on the PowerPoint, and so I won't attempt to read that. You can read that for yourselves. If you'd like to ask questions, please feel free to ask questions on Facebook. We've got a person who will attempt to answer the questions that you have. Please bear in mind that we can't answer technical questions about your eligibility, but general information we're happy to give in that forum. If you want to have further questions after the seminar, we'll give you contact details so that you can call us or contact us or come and visit us in our office here in Canberra, and we're happy to keep working with you to to make it very clear what you need to do to migrate. Okay, so let's just start. And what we are then doing is talking about regional Australia. So welcome to regional Australia, everyone. And the policy shift that's occurred is that the Australian government has got to the point of saying that the 3 big cities in Australia, Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane, are overcrowded, and in fact they want to divert new Australians into regional areas. So they announced a cut to the permanent migration program earlier in the year. It's been cut from 190,000 places to 160,000 places, and that cut is going to come out of the ability to apply for a skilled Subclass 189 visa that allows you to live anywhere in Australia and in the big cities. In fact, the cut is not that significant in real life because they only granted 160,000 visas last year anyway. So in fact the visa program is going to roll on much the same as it has for the last year. There will, however, be an increase in places allocated to the regional visa. So while the Australian government is taking on one hand, it is giving back on the other hand. Okay, so what is regional Australia? we'll have a look at that. But isn't that a beautiful photo of regional Australia? Who would not want to live there? But do not think that by living in regional Australia you'll need to be out in the bush, subject to bushfires and blowflies. In fact, that's not the case at all, because regional Australia is anywhere that is not Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane. So that includes Adelaide, which is the capital of South Australia, a city of over 1 million people. It includes Canberra, the national capital. It includes Tasmania and Hobart, the Northern Territory and Darwin, and it includes Perth. So in fact, while they talk about the definition of regional, in fact it means that you can live in some of the biggest cities in Australia. Okay. Another advantage or another impact of the change is that international students who study in Australia for 2 years can apply for a third year on their graduate visa. So the graduate visa allows students who study in Australia for 2 years to apply for a 2-year work visa. If you study in regional Australia, that then becomes a 3-year work visa. So that is part of the policy change that is to encourage international students and their migrants to move to regional areas of Australia. Okay, we'll get back to the regional visas in a moment, but I do appreciate that there may be people here at the seminar who don't have a very good understanding of the basic requirements to migrate. So I'd like just to take the time to go through the basic requirements for those people. I'll also speak slowly because I appreciate that people may not be native English speakers, and it's very difficult to learn a second language. We all know that. So I'll try and speak slowly, and we'll go through the information carefully with you. Okay, so what does it take to migrate to Australia? Well, there's certain requirements, and there's a certain process that you have to go through. So the first thing is you have to be under 45 years old to apply for the visa. Secondly, you have to have qualifications and work experience in most cases that's related to an occupation that's in demand in Australia. The third requirement is English language. So you have to have a level that basically enables you to work professionally in your occupation. So it's not a super advanced level, but it is a level that facilitates professional communication. The fourth requirement is state nomination, and that is a process that we'll talk about a little bit more later on. And the final requirement is the visa points test. So there's a visa points test, and you get points awarded for factors like age, qualifications, work experience, level of English, whether you've got a partner or not, whether you've studied in Australia, and together you need to pass the points test with the points that are required. So that in a sense is the legal requirements for the visa. If you're over 45, you can't apply. If you don't have relevant qualifications in an occupation in Australia, you can't apply. If you're struggling with your English, then we suggest you come to Australia to study first, to improve your English, and then apply. State nomination, we'll talk about that later, and then there's the visa points test. Okay, so what is the process of applying? So basically it's a legal process. All of the requirements are set out in the legislation of the Australian government, and it takes about 12 months. So it's fairly slow, and it's because you've got to do the 6 steps in a row, step after step after step. So the first is the accreditation process, which is how the Australian government looks at your qualifications. Second, English. Third, the state nomination. The fourth step is critical, and it is that you have to be invited to apply for the visa. So at the moment you can't just apply, you have to be invited to apply. So it's become a critical step that you need to receive an invitation to be able to make your application. The fifth step is the visa application itself, and then the sixth step is final documents, police clearances and medical examination. Okay, so a little bit more detail. Accreditation. Basically there's different lists of occupations. The federal government has a list, and each state government in Australia also has a list of occupations in demand in the particular state. So there's about 600 occupations on the various state and federal government list. And what you need to do is to have a qualification. In some cases that's a degree, but in some cases that can be a technical or trade qualification as well, relevant to the occupation. And usually you need to have work experience in that occupation. different occupations have different accrediting bodies, and the first step is to put your qualifications and work reference letters together and to make that application. Generally takes about a month for the accrediting body to make a decision, and that just will be a letter that says that John Smith is accredited as a chemical engineer. Okay, so that's the accreditation process. Everyone has to do it, and it's the basic requirement of the skilled visa. Secondly, the English exam. There's different tests that you can take. The IELTS test, the TOEFL internet version, the PTE academic, or the Cambridge advanced. And the score that you need to migrate is competent English on the left there. In terms of the IELTS is marked out of 9, and you need 6 out of 9 on each part of the test to pass the English exam. If you reach 7 out of 9 on the English on each part of the IELTS test, listening, reading, writing and speaking, you get additional points in the visa points test. It doesn't matter which test you take, and the scores are set out in that document, and if you contact us, we've got the table of scores. If your English isn't strong enough to apply for the skilled visa at the moment, then we are suggesting that people should consider coming to Australia to study as a way of improving English to reach the score that you then need to migrate. The third step is state nomination. So here we have a map of Australia, and you can see the different states. So each state government has a list of occupations that are in demand in Australia, and Australia's a big country, and there's quite a variation of occupations that are in demand in different places. If you are nominated by, and with state nomination, there's another 400 occupations that are nominated by the states but are not nominated by the federal government. So if your state nomination means that more people can apply for the visa, and with the support of the state government, but it also produces additional points on the visa points test. So even if you're on the federal government's occupations list, don't have enough points, apply for state government's nomination, you've got enough points. But the main thing that state government nomination does is produce an automatic invitation to apply for the skilled visa. So this is back to the need to be invited to apply for the visa. And at the moment, as I was saying, you need about 85 points on the visa points test to receive an invitation for the Subclass 189 independent visa. And in fact, with the policy shift to supporting and promoting regional Australia, they're wanting to cut down the number of people that are migrating to Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane in effect. And the way they've done that is to put the points test up to 85 points or thereabouts to receive an invitation for that independent visa. To apply for the state nominated visa, you need 65 points. Okay, so it's significantly lower number of points for state nomination, and what in fact that means is that it's become very hard for non-native English speakers to apply for a 189 independent visa. It's also quite difficult for native speakers as well, because you have to be young with a lot of experience at the same time, and you know, it's very rare that if you're 30 you will have 8 years of professional work experience. So there will be a big drop off in the number of invitations issued for that visa, and it will be replaced by people who are state nominated and who then are invited to apply for the skilled visa with the state nomination. Okay, so the visa application itself, remember it's the 5th step. So you've been accredited, you've passed the English exam, you've been nominated by the state government, you've been invited to apply, and then you're ready to apply for the visa. The application is made online. You can include all family members in the application, and you upload supporting documents to the immigration portal. You pay an fee to the Australian government at the time that you apply for the visa, and what happens is that the Australian government says thank you very much, we appreciate that you've applied, and then nothing happens for perhaps 6 months, and your application goes into the queue, and then finally you'll get to the point where the case officer, that is the person who's going to decide your application, will look at it. If everything's good, they'll ask you to have a medical exam. So they're looking for tuberculosis, infectious diseases, or people who have chronic conditions that would be very expensive to treat in the Australian public health system. You also need to provide a police clearance, basically be of good character, which is, in short, it means that you can't have been sentenced to jail for 12 months. If you're sentenced to jail for 11 months, that's fine, but 12 months, then you're likely to have a problem. So it's not speeding fines or, run-of-the-mill offences like that, but fairly serious criminal matters that will trigger an issue with the police clearance and the character assessment. Okay, so what we're talking about with the skilled visa are permanent visas. Okay, so the Australian government actually uses the skilled visa program to bring highly qualified people into Australia, but only in areas where there's a demand for your particular skills. So basically, it's a system that is very virtuous in the sense that it's great for Australia. It's great for Australian businesses to have an influx of skilled, qualified, competent people with good English coming in looking for jobs. But it's also good for the visa applicant, because you're coming into a situation where there's a demand for your skills, basically. So the idea is not that you drive an Uber for 5 years while you're adjusting to life in Australia, but that you come in really ready to hit the Australian job market and find a job and start working on Australian wages and Australian salaries pretty quickly. And the experience of the skilled visa program is in fact that it does work like that. I mean, of course, people need time to adjust and find jobs, but the way that the visa program is structured and the legal requirements mean that there's a really good match between the available supply of jobs in Australia and the people coming in. So it's a permanent visa. You have access to the public health system, access to the universities, access to the schools for your children, access to elements of the social security and pension system, and after 4 years in Australia, you can apply for Australian citizenship and Australian passports. You don't have to abandon the country that you came from, so you can be a dual citizen, and that benefit will then extend for the rest of your life. So, in fact, while it might be a big decision to migrate, and you can talk about it in terms of investment, the outcomes are fantastic, both in the short term, which is the ability to apply for jobs in Australia, and the long term in terms of the transition to a life and citizenship in a new country without losing the things that you've left behind. Okay, so I want now to move to talk about the Subclass 491 visa. So this visa is the new vehicle for facilitating migration to regional Australia. Okay, so the government has allocated 14,000 places to this visa. This visa replaces the old Subclass 489 visa, which was also a regional visa. The difference is that this visa is a 5-year work visa, and you can apply for permanent residence after 3 years in Australia, 3 years of living in regional Australia. Okay, you can apply for this visa from outside Australia or after having studied in Australia. Okay, and you will need state nomination, and it gets back to the importance of state nomination as a key step in the process of applying to migrate. So with the provisional, the Subclass 491 visa, it's a 5-year visa. You can attend Australian schools, kids can attend Australian schools, universities, work in any occupation in any part of regional Australia. So that means Adelaide, Canberra, Darwin, Hobart or Perth, all part of the region. You're eligible for Medicare, which is the public health system in Australia. So in fact, the entitlements and benefits of the visa are very similar to the permanent visa, although it is a 5-year provisional visa. But it provides a clear bridge to the ability to apply for permanent residence and then Australian citizenship. Okay. What are the rules for this visa? Okay, well, we've gone through the rules for the visa already, but we can have a look at them again, because it's important that people thinking about applying for a skilled visa understand the process, and the documentation as well that you'll need to include in an application for the visa. Okay, so again, under 45 years old, goes without saying, you've got to be accredited in an occupation on one of the state government lists, on the regional lists. You have to have at least competent English, which is 6 out of 9 on each part of the IELTS, so one of the equivalent tests. You've got to be accredited in your occupation. That's the first step in applying for the visa, formal step in the visa application process, having your skills recognised here and experience. You've got to pass the visa points test. 65 points is what you need, so far less than the 85 points required for the independent visa. You've got to be nominated by an Australian government, or alternatively, if you've got a family member living in regional Australia, that family member can also sponsor you for the visa. So again, this is quite significant really. So the sponsor can be a parent, a grandparent, it can be an uncle or aunt, it can be a brother or sister, or it can be a cousin. So if you have a cousin living on the Gold Coast, for example, or you've got a cousin in Adelaide, or you've got a cousin in Canberra, then that cousin can sponsor you for the visa, and that will produce an extra 15 points on the visa points test. That can make the difference between being able to apply or not. And again, once you then become an Australian permanent resident, you in turn can support your family members apply for the visa. Okay, so then you've got to express an interest in being invited to apply for the visa. State nomination will trigger that invitation automatically, as we've discussed, and then you've got to meet the final health and character requirements. So that is basically the process and the requirements for applying for the Subclass 491 visa. In addition to the Subclass 491 visa, there's also a permanent state nominated visa. It's a very, very similar process to apply for the permanent version of the state nominated visa, with some slight variations, particularly in terms of the points test, and you get fewer points for the permanent visa. But when we do the assessment of someone's eligibility to apply, then we look very carefully at what is your best visa option. Okay, changes to the points test. The points test is changing in 2 days' time on Saturday, and in fact the changes are fairly positive for most people. So what are they? So first of all, the points has gone from 10 to 15 points for the state government nomination, and also for family sponsorship. So all of a sudden, the points that you get for that really mean that many people, if not most people, will pass the visa points test. In addition, people who have a partner, can be same sex, or a married partner, or a de facto partner. And if that partner also can be accredited and reach competent English, then it's 10 points. If your partner speaks competent English, then that will be 5 points. If you are single, that will be 10 points. And if your partner is an Australian permanent resident, then that will be 10 points as well. The only people who don't get points, partner points, will be people who have a partner who cannot be accredited and who do not have a good level of English. So in fact what they're doing is punishing those people in terms of the points test. Not punishing them, that's the wrong word, but they're encouraging people with partners who will be able to find work quickly in Australia based on their skills to apply for the visa by giving them extra points on the visa points test. Then the other change to the points test is that if you study in Australia, you get additional points, and in particular if you study in a science, technology, engineering or mathematics area, you'll get an extra 10 points on the visa. So we'll talk about that in a minute, because there's a link between studying in Australia and migrating to Australia, and this is one of the aspects where they encourage people to come in, study those particular courses, get extra points in the visa points test, and to be able to apply to migrate at the end of the course. So points continue to be allocated for age, work experience, the level of your course, and Australian studies and language skills, and these are just the new factors that will produce points in the visa points test. Okay, so the other new visa is the Subclass 494 visa, and this is an employer-sponsored regional visa. And I don't want to say much about this visa except that it replaces what was a permanent regional employer-sponsored visa, the Subclass 187, and it will have 9,000 places attached to it. The issue with the 494 visa is that you need a company to offer you a job, and you need to, and that company needs to sponsor you. So while people will be applying for these visas, practically, if you're outside Australia, it's difficult to find a company that's prepared to sponsor you. And it's the same with, there was some publicity by the Australian government about a year ago about new Dharma visas, and they were regional visas as well, but they also required a company to sponsor you. Okay, so in terms of where most of our clients are at, and that is people that are thinking of migrating to Australia independently, either without family members here or without a company to sponsor you, then you'll be coming through not on this Subclass 494 visa or the Dharma, but with the Subclass 491 or the Subclass 190 visa. Okay, but just to let you know that there is a version of the visa that employers can sponsor, and employers can sponsor you for a permanent visa as well. But there's the practicality of having a job offer. Okay, so then what happens at the end of the 5 years? So you've applied for the Subclass 491 visa, it's been granted, and what happens then? Well, the Australian government has created a new permanent visa, and it's for people that have lived and worked in Australia for 3 years, and it is the permanent visa. So the requirements are that you need to have held the 491 or the 494 for 3 years, and been working professionally, or met a certain income threshold. So you don't need to pass the English test again or to be reaccredited. You've done all of that work with the first time round, and it's really a question of just rolling forward into permanent residence. Okay, well, I now want to kind of introduce this discussion about the possibility of studying to migrate. So, in fact, while you can apply to migrate for a permanent visa from outside Australia, you can also apply after having completed studies within Australia. And those studies can either be of 2 years duration, or in some cases 12 months. So the way that it works is that you apply for a student visa, you come into Australia, you do the course. On the student visa you can work 20 hours a week and full-time in the course vacations. And if you do a master's and have a partner, well then the partner can work full-time. So there's this great work rights associated with studying in Australia. You do your course and you get to the end of the course, then it's possible to apply for a skilled visa without needing to return to your country. Okay, so what are the visas that you can apply for? Well, first of all, there's the graduate visa. So a graduate visa is a 2-year work visa for people who have studied at university or also studied a course that's related to an occupation on the federal government's list. Okay, and that is a 2-year work visa, and it basically gives people time to work in Australia, to keep improving their English, to get the full accreditation, to apply for state nomination and the visa. Okay, so one of the changes that will take place on Saturday is that if you study in regional Australia, and particularly I'd like to mention Canberra, then you'll be eligible for an extra year on your graduate visa. So it becomes a 3-year work visa. So, here in Canberra, there's 2 really good institutions, the Canberra Institute of Technology, offers courses at the diploma level, so very practical, hands-on courses in a whole lot of different areas. It's a government institution, it's been in business for 90 years, and the courses that it offers are significantly less expensive than courses at the university level. The other institution in Canberra that is worth mentioning is the University of Canberra. So that as well is the University of the City of Canberra, and it offers a whole lot of good university level courses on a whole lot of different subjects. So if you were to study in Canberra for 2 years, you'd then be eligible to apply for a 3-year graduate visa. So the proposal of coming to Australia to study, it is for the period of the course, but then it's an additional 3 years. So in fact it's a 5-year proposal. 2 years on the student visa and 3 years on the work visa. Okay, and then in that period of time, in that period of 5 years, if you are careful with the course that you study, it is expected that you'll be able to apply for one of the new regional visas, or even directly for the permanent visa. Okay, so this is why there's a clear link now between migration and education, and the Australian government is actually encouraging students to come to Australia to complete those studies, and it can be either postgraduate studies, or it can also be studies that you complete after high school, or it can be diploma level qualifications. And if you do, then it opens the pathway to applying to Migrate directly from Australia. And in effect, there's the additional points you get on the visa points test for the Australian studies, and the ability to apply for the graduate visa. So there's some very deliberate incentives in the system to encourage that. But a word of warning: not all courses open the door to being able to apply for the skilled visa or even the graduate visa at the end of the course. So there's certain critical factors that you need to take into account. So the first factor now with these changes is that you've got to go regional. Okay, you can't expect to be able to apply realistically for a skilled visa if you're studying in Sydney, Melbourne or Brisbane. It's going to be very difficult for people who have those courses, who have studied in those cities, to then apply for to Migrate at the end of the day, because people are awarded points for studying in regional Australia and a longer period on the graduate visa. So you're needing to be look at cities like Canberra, like Adelaide, like Tasmania, like the Northern Territory, to facilitate your ability to apply for the skilled visa at the end of your course. Okay, so the other critical issue is state nomination, and I'll talk a little bit about that in the next slide. But state government policies are the difference between needing to study for 2 years, or in some cases studying for 12 months. And at the end of the day, whether you study for 2 years or 12 months, it comes down to time and it comes down to money. So if you can do a course that perhaps is 10 to 12,000 Australian dollars over 1 year and then apply for the skilled visa, it is better than having to do a $60,000 master's at Sydney University, for example. Okay, so the state nomination policies are a critical part of the assessment puzzle. Okay, the third issue is accreditation. So basically, if you've got qualifications from your country and work experience, and if you can be accredited, then it means that you've got far more options for the kind of course that you can do to Migrate. Okay, so you in effect what you'll be doing is combining your current studies and qualifications based on your overseas experience with studies in Australia of 12 months, put the two together and apply for the skilled visa. Okay, so that's the thing that has to be looked at very carefully. The duration of the course, either a 2-year degree or course to access a graduate visa, or in some cases 12 months, and that then is that issue of funding to cover the cost of your study. Okay, another issue is whether the course that you're doing relates to an occupation in demand in Australia. So, for example, cooking, commercial cookery, it's been on the list of occupations for a long time, And if you were to come in and study a course in cooking, well then that would open the door to a graduate visa and the possibility to migrate. But not all courses lead to the ability to migrate, and there's a whole range of business diplomas and a whole lot of courses actually that are not helpful to the ability to apply for a graduate visa or even to migrate at the end of the course. You might be surprised, but MBAs aren't helpful, and many of the business degrees aren't helpful, and it's more the technical courses, well basically courses that are on the list of occupations in demand, that will facilitate that. Okay, and then the final thing is the level of your studies. You know, if you're doing a PhD, you get additional points, a master's by research, additional points, a university degree, down to a trade qualification. So that can all factor into the points awarded for your studies. So what I would just like to say in summary is that, you know, before making the decision to come to study, you really need professional advice to look at each of these factors and how they relate to your particular case. Because we're looking at your level of English, we're looking at your qualifications, we're looking at how many years of experience you have, whether you can get accredited, and we're providing advice saying, look, don't go to Victoria, you know, go to Tasmania. Or we're saying, for you, Canberra is the best option to facilitate your migration process. Or we're telling you, go to Darwin, you know, or wherever we're telling you, but we'll be giving you independent advice and suggestions about to the kind of course that you would do and where you should go to do it. Okay, state nomination. So the problem that we have today is that the new legislation is taking effect on Saturday, but the state governments have not yet announced their nomination policies for the new subclass 491 visa. Okay, so everyone is kind of waiting to see practically what the state governments are going to present. I mean, state nomination, as we've explained, it's now critical because that results in the automatic invitation to apply for the visa, and it reflects the move to regionality in the visa program as well. So now the state governments are playing a far more important role than they played before, and the particular policies and occupations lists that they announce will be quite significant in the whole mix of working out what your best visa strategy is. So there's more to come in the next 2 weeks. We're expecting the announcements to take place early next week, and we're going to suggest that you contact us once that part of the pie is being baked, and then we will be able to give information and advice on the full package. Okay, so that's the formal content of the presentation. I just would like to talk a little bit about our work and what we do. So, well, we're lawyers and migration agents, and we've worked in the industry for 15 years. And in fact, I would say, you know, VisAustralia is part of an industry, and we're part of an industry, a migration advice industry. People in our industry work very hard, and there's a lot of provide competent advice to people in what is a reasonably complex area of law and policy. A success rate, 98% success rate for our visa applications. And I want to be very clear about that, because that isn't an exaggeration, but that is a true reflection of the level of success that we have had at VisAustralia. The other side of the coin is that you have to pass the English test, and you have to be accredited, and you have to be nominated by a state government to get to the point of the visa application. And that is where the real challenge lies. So once we get there, 98% success rate. So we've got a code of conduct. If we make a mistake and wreck your case, you can make a complaint. We have to have a written agreement that sets out what we do and what the payments are to us and both to the Australian government. And it's all very clearly defined before we start work what our role is and what your visa strategy is. And we've got offices in Canberra, that's where we are now, and in Mexico. Okay, so to get all of this started, the first thing that we need to do is to have a formal legal assessment. And really that allows us to understand your circumstances, understand what your plans are, and then to give very detailed advice and help you work out a strategy that will result in you being able to migrate. So whether you can apply directly for permanent residence from your country, and in certain cases you can, and in certain occupations you can. Engineers, construction project managers, architects, there's a whole lot of occupations where it's quite realistic to apply to migrate from your country. But in other cases you'll need to come to study, and then we're into that issue of, well, what course, where, how will you combine your previous studies with that migration journey. So we then will sit down very carefully. The interview will be by Skype. We'll have the discussion, we'll provide the advice, we'll confirm that advice in writing, we'll give a quote for your full migration process and answer your follow-up questions. So it's a really critical starting point to actually determine, what the realistic chances you have of migrating are. Okay, how do you book it? So book a consultation. Go to the VisAustralia website. On the left there, book a consultation. There's a calendar that will enable you to pick a time that's convenient to you and in Australian office hours. The consultation will be with me directly over Skype. The assessment costs $350 Australian dollars, and you can pay by credit card at the time, and we'll go ahead and with that consultation. Okay, for people who are looking for more confirmation, while we've got this screen up, I'll point you to the free self-assessment. So that is our self-assessment system, Visa Online, and it's been updated with the changes to the points test, and the list of occupations that are now currently being in demand in the States is also reflected in that free self-assessment. So that is also a useful tool that doesn't cost anything if you're looking for further information before booking the consultation. And ladies and gentlemen, that is it really. That is the presentation. These are our contact details, email, phone, and our office in Canberra. There's been a lot of information that we've given in this presentation. It will be available on YouTube and Facebook. So feel free to review it. And there's been a lot of words as well, and a lot of spoken words and words on the page. But that is because the subject matter is quite dense. But I hope that you found it helpful, and I hope that it has given you some orientation as to how migration works in Australia, and then what you need to do to take that first step. So with that, thank you again for attending. It's been a pleasure to have met you, and I look forward to further contact in the future. So thanks a lot. My name's Nick Houston, Director of VisAustralia. See you later.